The first 30 seconds, you said every town around us, including our city.
Okay. we need a big sign, like an on air sign.
Yeah. On air. Click. On air.
You know, I just turn it on and off throughout the whole episode, right?
I'm sure you would. I'd be fucking having a seizure or something.
We can fix that.
We'd have to put that warning label, like, the following can cause seizures.
Yeah.
Oh, I think we need a warning label about the idiocy.
From the host, yes, we do.
Yeah, well, you know.
Producer's great. Guests are great.
Debatable.
This is so red team. I'm a producer. I'm a host. No, you damn fireman. Y'all on the red team, man.
Let me tell you about the awesome nap I had at work yesterday.
Yeah.
Let's hear about yours.
Tell me about it. I was up all night on the phone. It's fabulous. Maybe I should have taken that job.
Yep. 20 years later, like, man, I think I made a mistake.
Yeah.
You know, the perk of our job, too, is less paperwork.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
What
hang
job
on
are
now.
you talking about?
Yeah.
You know,
The perk of my job.
in
Yeah.
17 years, you know how many reports he's done?
Yeah.
3.
Yeah.
And they were all wrong.
Scrapped and start over.
He's lucky he's got a buddy that knows how to do reports.
I did 3 in an hour last night.
Hey,
Those are rookie numbers there.
congratulations.
You gotta
Sounds
put
like you
those
need
3 in an hour.
Need to transfer. Yeah.
All right, welcome to the Washdown podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Green. With me, co-host Chris Nelson. And James Moran is our producer. And today we are talking to Doug Niemeier. And Doug, you've been a police officer for how long now?
25 years.
25 years, all the way up to the rank of major.
Correct.
So that is, I mean, that's a lot.
Some might say highly overpromoted.
I don't know you that well, but
Right.
I don't think so.
Yep, 25 years. And it seems like yesterday, to be honest with you, that I got started. And wasn't really the career path that I was on, but this is where I've ended up. And you know, looking back today, a lot of people that came into our department when I did are retiring now, and everybody keeps asking, when are you going to retire? And I'm like, I don't see it on the horizon yet.
Having too much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I just think you finally get to a point in your career where you can kind of give back to people, an opportunity of all the stuff that I've seen, learned, been taught by people before me. You know, the world's changed so much in those 25 years. When I first came on, me and my partner had one radio between the two of us, one walkie-talkie. That was it.
That seems a little crappy.
But you didn't know any different.
Yeah.
You didn't know any different. You came on, and I remember I got a radio, and my FTO didn't even have one because there wasn't enough radios to go around. So, and now you get in a car, and it looks like a spaceship. You know, there's computers, there's microphones, there's in-car camera. We all now have body cams. I mean, it's 25 years of change, but one thing that goes back when you've been on for 25 years, you got life experience.
Absolutely.
So
Can't argue that with that.
Yeah. Well, and it's like the conversation that we had the other day. He made the comment of, you know, I never thought I would be the old guy on the crew. And we're at that point in our careers, 17 years in. We look around and it's like, okay, well, altogether, the rest of the crew doesn't even have as much time on as we do. So, yeah.
I mean, it happens from time to time when
Yeah.
we're getting detailed or something or work overtime somewhere.
Yeah.
It's
well,
just
and
weird.
it's like what you said. We're at that point now where we can start to give back, and you know the lessons that we've learned, pass those on.
right, and it's at the station I work. I have 171 employees, and you know, as I tell my command staff or I tell supervisors, the people that are coming on the job are my kids' age. You know, my oldest daughter's going to be 23. She could work here. So you look at it and you're like, I don't feel that way. I may act that way. Maybe I don't act that way. But you know, it's gone by very fast for me.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. What do you do, because you're in that command leadership position? How do you connect with that younger generation of officers coming in?
I'm very upfront. I'm probably very visible too. I'm a morning person. I'm not a morning person, but I get up early. Maybe that's because I'm old too. Not sure.
Can't sleep.
Yeah, I
Past
can't
3
sleep
a.m.
anymore.
The body hurts. I got to get out of bed.
So I'm usually up by a little after 5 in the morning. So I get to my station when my dog watch crew is leaving. So I see all the guys that worked overnight, and then I see all the people that are on the day shift, and then I'm usually there when the afternoons are coming in. So I'm around a lot. That comes from all the past jobs I've ever had. A guy that trained me to be a detective told me back in, here we go, we're going to age myself again. You have a good job when you work crappy hours and you have a pager. And I'm like, all right. But that means you have a good job because you worked bad hours and you were on call. And
I think we need to explain what a pager is to.
I know what a pager is, assholes.
so
He Googled it.
So, nowadays, a lot of the things that the employees that work for me are the things that I've actually learned some of the stuff from my kids, the social media, like, there wasn't such thing as a podcast back then or the things that the way we get information out so fast. So I guess as I talk to my command staff, I talk to them like, if you're a good parent, you probably be a good mentor or a good leader of people that are young, because a lot of the things that you go through at home, you go through at work. So really, you guys talked about it at your station, just look at it in the course of life. When you're young, you're running around, you're doing things, you're invincible. Then you have kids and your life kind of changes. And then as your kids get older and they're doing activities and then they become young adults, now you're still parenting them, but they're young adults. I was on the phone last night with my oldest daughter for probably 45 minutes, and she was just asking me questions. Dad, what about this? Dad, and you're still parenting. So when you go to work, it's almost, I call it adult parenting. But in a different environment. If you're at work, you're a mentor, or if you're at home, you're dad.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I look at it, and that's how I explain it to myself anyway.
Something that really stuck out for me, and I think really is a hallmark of my generation, as much as we can joke about it, is it's not you're not a boss, you're not a supervisor, you're a leader and a mentor, and you look at it as such. And a lot of our generation always says like, well, they didn't do it, so why are we going to listen to them? But you do have that pedigree, you have that history, and you embrace that role as like a mentor to share your experience and lead your employees beneath you with that. And that really speaks volumes, I know, and I can only imagine the reputation you have amongst your employees.
Well, I appreciate that. It's not always fun to be in a command position or a leadership position, but I wouldn't have it any other way. Due to the fact that, as I was coming up, I never dreamed I'd be in the position I'm in. Like I said, I jokingly say it all the time. I might be the most highly overpromoted person, but on the other hand, when those opportunities presented themselves, if someone opens a door for you, that's all they're going to do, open a door. It's what you do with that opportunity. And I try to instill that in my command staff, try to instill that in kids and things like that. But I think what you were saying, about being a leader, and it's changed too. Back in the day, it wasn't don't ask no questions. You just did what you were told. That's how I grew up.
Same here.
Yeah, you didn't grow up asking questions. You did. And nowadays it's just different, and you got to adapt to that. I mean, we all need to adapt to that, and when you don't, you're going to get left behind. And I think that's probably the biggest difference from whenever I came on to now is, I'll give you an example. I had an officer come to me with a great idea. I could have took the idea and made it mine, but I didn't. I took him. I got a meeting set up for him, and he's went on. He's actually, hopefully someday, going to be in charge of all the social media for us. But if I wouldn't have listened to him, or I would have just stole his idea, where would he just be out here still running calls? And that's not who I am, or that's not what I want us as a blue team to be about.
Yeah, you want to see your officer succeed in something he was passionate about, and probably not making a better officer out of him too.
Yeah, and you guys, whenever the other part about being in leadership is when things are great, it's I remember the years I spent in homicide, it was Niemeier squad solved that, but when things didn't go right, Niemeier squad didn't. And I used to tell them that all has to do with the detectives that worked for me too, right? They your success lies on their work ethic and how they handle themselves. But my name would be attached to it. Yeah. So that's the same way now. The farther up you go,
it's a lot like an offensive line. Like when the offensive line has a great game, you're like, oh my god, the quarterback and the running back were fantastic.
Yes.
But when they don't, they're like, that offensive line, goddamn, it's just
and that both my daughters played high level softball. Well, my oldest daughter played at a Division II school, and my youngest daughter's playing college softball now, and they're both pitchers. And softball is based around a lot of pitching, and if you throw hard, and it's the same way. I always tell when they have pitching lessons. I just gave 2 pitching lessons last night, and I told the pitcher, I said, here's the problem, and they always have a catcher with them, right? And I'm like, listen, thank you. You're never going to get thanked. You're the catcher. I said, when the game's over, it's going to be, hey, you pitched a great game, good job, all these things. I go, you're going to get nothing. That's just how it is. And I want you to know that pitcher's ability to get a strike call here or a strike call there is because of you, but they're going to get the credit. And you need to know that you're important. So we always go back to our catchers, and my daughters have always done that because win or lose, who's it on? The pitcher. She pitched a great game, they won, but if they lose, they lost 2-1, but they didn't say that the left fielder made an overthrow and an error and this and that. They go, well, Brooke gave up a home run. We lost. No. So it's on the pitcher's back, win or lose. Sometimes everybody else doesn't get the credit, and it's kind of that way when you're in a leadership role and things. It's, just like for you guys, I'm sure it's your leadership gets that's such and such a shift.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So there are names attached. There are names attached to it, right?
Yeah. So let's kind of go back. What made you, how did you get into being a police officer? What was the drive to do that?
Fire Academy fail.
Yeah, Fire Academy fail. That's kind of no. Never made it there. You guys were too slow. Couldn't get me. And I'll even back up a little farther from that. Because this plays into a lot of things. I know my brother's been here and talked to you guys, and it goes all the way back to when we were kids. A lot of people don't know when my parents moved to Kansas City, they lived off Independence Avenue. In Hardesty, actually. Third house north Independence Avenue in Hardesty. And then I was born, and my parents moved out to Ruskin, and then eventually it cost too much to drive to work for my dad. He worked down off Front Street in the trucking business, and we moved to the little neighborhood next to Worlds of Fun. So that's where we kind of ended up and grew up, but my parents come from families of 8 and 9. So my dad has 8 siblings, my mom has 9. And from farm like Brookfield, Wayne area, which is up northeast Missouri. So we come from a background of people who work hard for a little bit of nothing. And my dad was working, and I'll never forget. He made $100. I think if I remember, it was like $127 a week, and that took care of a family of 4. And there'd be times he was in the union. There'd be times they'd be on strike and things like this. But we didn't know any better. And we grew up just a normal kid, but you always worked hard. So when it got time to graduate from high school, it was kind of like you're either going to the military or you got to figure something out. And I was lucky enough I played baseball. My parents were very supportive of athletics, and I went and played college baseball. I still didn't know what I was going to do. Nobody in my family had ever been to college. I was like, I'm just going to go play baseball. Yeah. So they're like, you have to pick a major. I'm like, okay, give me some
What's
choices.
That?
Yeah, I'm like, give me some choices. So I just looked on there, and I was like, well, criminal justice, because my next door neighbor had been a policeman. So that's what I picked. And, I got out of college. I got married very young. I was 23 when I got married. And I applied for the police department, applied for the fire department on the exact same day, went downtown and applied. It took almost a year and a half, and the police department called, and I got through all the testing, and they hired me. And I was in the academy for 6 weeks, and the fire department calls, and they're like, hey, we have an opening at the fire academy, blah, blah. And I said, no, I'm in the police academy. And they're like, no, just go ahead and quit. I go, no, I'm not going to do that.
We tried to help you. We tried.
Yeah, so it's been me against the red team for many years. And you know, at the time, my brother was already on the independence. He was already working as a fireman. And so... you know, I would have had the chance to be on the department before him, and I didn't, and I think I made the right choice for me. You know, I really do. I think I made the right choice for me. I'm a firm believer that everybody has a position in this world, because sometimes you hear people say, "Why would you do that?" And I'm like, "Well, why do you do that?" I think there's a spot for everybody. You just got to find it, and some people never find that spot. You know, as I tell my brother all the time, I mean, you guys have saved the concrete industry. I mean, you guys save them basements every time. I mean, that's fabulous, you know. So, no, sorry about that. that's just me and him, right? Going back and forth all the time. Fine. And trust me, I take it well too. So, but that's what happened, and I got in the police academy, and it goes back to the same thing though, and that's kind of where I sit today. Is that's the people who gave me my first opportunity. And you didn't. When we grew up, you didn't quit because you didn't like something. You didn't quit because it was hard. You didn't quit. You made it a commitment, and these people gave me an opportunity, and I wasn't going to quit. And went through the police academy, and was assigned to a patrol division station, and worked there. And I always knew I wanted to be at that point. I always wanted to be a detective. Became a detective, did that for a few years. Had my first daughter was born, and then became a supervisor. So you go back out and work in patrol. The opportunity came up, and the job opening came up as supervisor in homicide, and I'd worked there already as a detective, and that's where I really wanted to go, and I got it. And that's probably the foundation for my entire career, is that investigations. And I spent like almost 10 years in the homicide unit. And we can come back to that in a little while, because that's when kind of things in my life I thought were fantastic, and little did I know they were falling apart. And I did 10 years there, and that's whenever I made the decision I wasn't necessarily being the best dad, because my other daughter had been born. They were getting to the point where my oldest was getting ready to, I think she was in middle school by then. My youngest was getting ready to go to middle school, and I'm like, you know, I'm spending 400 or 500 hours of overtime every year at work, and it was of all hours. You know, you get called all hours of the day and night. And I was like, I got to be a better dad. So I worked on that at that point, and then got myself out of homicide and went on to work undercover for about 5 years, and then got hurt on the job, and decided to take the commander's test and passed the darn thing. And I was like, okay. And then lo and behold, a few years later, I got promoted again. So, you know, that time that I was in homicide is probably what shaped the outcome of my life, for the good and the bad, right? And that's what I'll probably kind of focus on is when I got there, there was no better job on our department, in my opinion. And we ran all the time. We would catch a case. We would stay at work for 24 or 48. It didn't matter. We were going to stay until we solved it. And I had great people working for me. I was younger back then. And I always said, you know, if you want to be the best homicide person, you got to not be outworked. It goes right back to the same thing of how I grew up. You know, if you can stand on your 2 feet, then you need to be at work working. And I did that for a long time. And we were, and I felt like we were good. We might not have been the smartest group of guys and gals, but I always said, don't let anybody else outwork us. And that's kind of what we put our stuff on is our work ethic. And that paid dividends. And I'll tell you, the first and my two girls were growing up, and the event that, changed everything is when my brother's daughter passed away. Because my girls were little. My youngest was 4, and my oldest was 8 years old when that happened. And like the whole world got turned upside down. But being the guy that was working in homicide, right, you're just like, well, I got to handle this and help him and get him through this. And my folks, you talk about some salt of the earth people, just they've always been there for us. So when that happened, it changed us all. And I was like, I got to be a better dad. So I worked there another year or so. And people say, what do you mean by be a better dad? Well, you need to make sure you're at every event, which I was, but I might go and then leave. Or are you there to put them on the bus, be there whenever it's time to throw the softball around?
Or are you even
all
there?
Those things.
You may be there physically, but are you even there mentally?
Right. And I thank you. Yeah, that's kind of the whole thing right there. And so that was the first time I ever did. I do it all the time now, but the guy that just called me a little while ago, he's the one that told me, he's like, we all need to take a look in the mirror about once a week and just self-reflect and go, are you okay? Are you doing all right? Because we find ourselves just boom, 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 boom through life, and we don't think about ourselves. We don't check on ourselves. We take care of everybody else, take care of everybody else's situations, everybody else's problems, and we never self-reflect. And that was the first time I can ever remember, and I didn't know what I was doing at the time. I just knew that I wanted a better relationship with my daughters. So I got my old insurance card out. I didn't tell anybody, and I called that employee assistance program, and I dialed them up, and they answered the phone. I said who I was, and I said I want to be a better dad. And they're like, okay, come see us. And I show up, and of course, instead of sitting down and listening, I go, okay, I get 6 free sessions. I need you to get this, and this is all I need help with. If you can just give me some pointers, we'll be good. I'll get out of here. I'll be on my way. Yeah. I'll never forget the lady looking, and she goes, do you want help, or you got it all figured out? And I'm like, yes. So I had to take a big, deep breath and go, hey, you're the one that recognizes the problem, deal with it. And the funny thing is, I got done before my 6 sessions, but I had to stop for a minute and self-reflect. And needless to say, a couple years later, or a year and a half later or so, I can't remember the exact time, but I got out of homicide and took this undercover job because we went in super early in the morning, and I would get off every day, and I'd be home when my daughters got off the bus. Yeah, and I was there every day.
I was wondering how going from homicide to undercover would relieve stress in that way, because I would think undercover would be all hours. Just
I took a job. I was in interdiction.
Okay.
So you work the real early in the morning time, like we'd be there super early, and then you're off at like 1:30 in the afternoon, and you're working those hours because that's when people move a lot of drugs, big drugs. And so it fit perfect. It just fell into place, and that was really good. I had a really good experience there in narcotics, and that's when I really built that relationship with my daughters, which come into play later on. Not that. I mean, I don't have the world's greatest dad hat or nothing. I've made my mistakes, and they'll tell you. My kids will tell you. They're not afraid to speak up, but they, moving forwards out of that, I was like I told you, I got married really young, and then that day came, and I ended up getting divorced. And, my youngest daughter was, I think she was a freshman in high school. And my oldest daughter was in college. And it was pretty devastating. It was devastating for them. It was I never thought after being married that long, that day would come. And it did. And, looking back, you just like, then you go through that again, right? Did I fail? Have I failed? Did what could I have done? And there's plenty of things I could have done better. I was angry. I was a lot of things when that happened, but I knew it needed to happen without going into it. So I got divorced, and there's some words exchanged over the next year, back and forth. But one of the things that came out of that for me is a bit of peace, because you got to start life over a little bit, right? And I was living in an apartment, and my youngest daughter was living with me, and now I figured out a whole new set of problems. I was like, I'm a single dad raising a teenage daughter.
What are you doing?
Full time. And I was working the dog watch shift. Because I'd been promoted and I was on dog watch. So and then you're like, what the, but we made it, right? And in the midst of all that, I had made up my mind that I was going to wait to buy a place that was mine. And I wanted a piece of land, and you guys know how hard it is to find a piece of land in Kansas City. And just by fate, I had been living. It was the first Christmas after having been divorced, and it was the first Christmas, and my oldest daughter was in Hawaii. One of her college roommates from softball lives in Hawaii, and she went there, and my youngest daughter was going out of town and flying out of town for Christmas. And so I took her to the airport. My other daughter's not here. She's flying that night, and I got Christmas by myself, and I'm like, man, this is empty. And Christmas is like my holiday. I love it. And it was just so empty. And one of the guys that works for me, he's worked for me for a long time. Now, he's going to tell you, now if you ever run into him, he's going to tell you we're partners. We are not partners. He's been my employee for a long time. But he's that kind of guy that checks on you. He checks on you, and he's like, I know you're sitting over there by yourself. You're not doing that. Get over here. And I went over there to his house, and when I got there, it turns out his wife's like, hey, you still looking for land? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And she's like, I think my mom might be looking to sell this. I don't know for sure. And I immediately left their house, drove to where it was. I walked on it, and I said, I will be living here by next Christmas, period. I didn't know how. I didn't know how I was going to get it done. I didn't even know if they wanted to sell the land. But lo and behold, 3.5 months later, I got the land. 4 months later, is in April of the next year, I got the land bought. And through a whole hell of a lot of work, I moved in on December the 21st the next year.
Nice.
Yeah. So now I live on that acreage, and I will tell you it is a place that myself, my brother, because he lives on my property too. I was about to make a comment, but I'm just going to hold it.
Go for it.
No. But it's got a humongous porch. It overlooks a pond. I'm just going to tell you, whenever I get off work and dealing with the things that I deal with now, I sit on that front porch, look around. There's deer, there's turkey, there's wildlife, there's
Dibs.
there's fishing.
You missed your dibs when you were late.
Yeah.
There's fishing. But one thing that I've also found that has not only bring me peace sitting there. There's a lot of policemen that I brought there, and you could sit on the porch and just, what's said there is said there, and you have an opportunity to just talk. I know my brother, him and I sit on that front porch, and he's like, man, this is what we ran last night or did last night. And I'll be like, well, it's not one-upping each other, but it's just getting things out. and talking about all the crap, I think I told you guys earlier, when I was in homicide, I was in charge of 1,367 death investigations. That's just the time that I was in homicide. That was murders, suicides, regular.
So how do you make that transition from being at work, investigating that stuff, seeing like that's the worst, you know, and then go home and be a dad?
I wasn't very good at it.
But you became, you were able to flip that switch, later on. So how were you able to do that?
Right. I wish I could tell you whenever it just hit me. And like I said, I think I did say, it is when Shayla passed away that you're like, hey, the world's not just going to keep, it can change in a heartbeat. We see it every day, but when it hits you, it's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
I would go to work and I would work homicides or death investigations or have my employees doing that, and it was work, right? And we looked at it that way because you couldn't get emotionally involved. If you got emotionally involved in all that, you'd be a puddle of nothing all the time. But you knew, and I still do to this day, I still have families from back then call me every time on the anniversary of one of their people's death, whether it was their son or their family member, my phone rings because I have the same phone. And they'll call me like, hey, and I'm like, hey, so I relive it all the time. But you just learn to cope with that because you're the last person in those death investigations that they feel a connection to. But you were asking, how did I turn the switch on and off? And I think the switch that turned on for me was when Shayla passed, and that not every day is guaranteed. And I'm like, I'm going to get every second I can with my kids. So that's when I self-reflected for the first time. I do it often now. I need to do it about every hour now. I hadn't been to the doctor in a long time. Hadn't been to the doctor. And it was about a year ago. My daughters were like, Dad, you need to go to the doctor. I'm like, well, they're going to find something wrong. It's like, if the engine light comes on your car, it doesn't mean it doesn't drive, right? You just kind of drive it until it doesn't drive no more. But so I went to the doctor, and for the first time in a long time, of course, she's like, well, you really shouldn't drink, and you shouldn't chew tobacco, and you shouldn't go out. And I'm like, what can I do? What can I do? And then she's like, oh, and you got high blood pressure, and I'm like. I don't really say what I do, right? I don't tell. So I kind of told her what I did for a living, and she's like, well, you have 171 people that you're in charge of that basically have, I'm like, yeah. She goes, that's why you have high blood pressure. And I'm like, so what do I need to do to get rid of it? She goes, retire. I'm like, well, that's not an option. So all these years I handled things, right? And I did things. And it wasn't until I got in a position of leadership to the point where I always say, I tell my entire station, I'm responsible for you and in charge of none of you. And they always look at you like, what do you mean? I'm like, when I was a supervisor, I had 8 people or 10 people or whatever, and I was there. I was in it. I was in it all the time. Now, that place runs 24/7. I'm not there 24/7, but I'm responsible for all of you. Not just while you're at work, but I'm responsible for you when you're not at work. So it's that kind of stress. The stress now is different now than it was back in 2003 whenever you're working homicides. So, and I know I jump around a lot because my brain runs faster than my mouth, believe it or not. So you guys got to kind of keep me on track sometimes.
Hey, man.
No, it's working pretty well.
Yeah.
All right.
So now we just kind of let it go where it goes.
So as you go up in the ranks, your stress level changes.
It's different.
Then, but the way you've dealt with it hasn't changed at all. How you cope. You've had to learn something over the years. EAP helped a little bit, and then have you talked to anybody else?
That's the only time I ever went and got quote unquote professional help.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of EAP. I'll be honest.
What's that?
I wasn't a fan of the EAP.
Yeah, no,
that was me though.
Yeah, it worked for me. It worked for me because I was very specific on what I needed help with. Not that I don't need help with other things, but I will tell you, having a brother that's on the red team helps me a lot because I can go over and bang on the door and be like, we need to sit on the porch. I got to talk. And he can do the same thing. Mm-hmm. But we don't do the same job. So it's not like if he was on the blue team with me and we're just, then it becomes rah, 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 back and forth. And it's not because, I mean, I know what you guys do, or I think I know what you guys do. And you guys think you know what I do probably, but there's not that intimacy of knowing how the organization runs and the other things that go on. So I really
run the same calls together,
right?
You know, and we kind of see some of the same things. We have a lot of overlap, but there's a lot that doesn't overlap that we can't really understand on your side and vice versa.
Right. You guys always get on a truck and drive away, and we're still there.
Yeah, we did our part.
Yeah.
You guys good? No. All right. See ya.
Yeah. No, but you know, how do you cope? You know, I mean, I always look at it and say there's a lot of outlets, right? A lot of people take bad outlets. A lot of people end up ruining their careers over stress. So mine's always been, I've been an avid bow hunter since I was a kid. And I've had to change now that I've gotten older. But every year I saved all of my vacation until bow season.
Do that.
Yeah.
And I literally would take 3 weeks off to go bow hunting, or 2 weeks off, or as much time as I could get. And I always looked at that as that was that time for me to completely get away and recharge. And that's what I did every single year. You couldn't find me from about, I'd always stay. I'd take the kids trick-or-treating on Halloween. And literally, if I could get out of town that night, I'd get out. If not, it was the next morning, and I was gone. And that was my way. And it was like you completely reset yourself after 11 months of working hard. You would reset for that because you would. Where our farm is, there's really no cell phone service. It's amazing. It's off the grid. You know, there's no. It's not off the grid, but there's no cell phone service.
But you can really reset.
Yeah, you can really reset. My best friend in the whole wide world I met when I played college baseball, he's a superintendent of schools up there. He literally lives 15 minutes from where my farm's at. So I get to spend time with him. Not that we don't spend time together other times, but, I mean, some real time of hunting and just sitting around a campfire and telling stories. But you got that whole reset, and then I could make it another 11 months. Now, I'll tell you, I've gotten older. You can't reset once a year. You know, I've learned that you got to take – that's why they give you so many weeks. Take one in the first quarter, take one in the middle, take one in the third quarter, take one in the last.
When you say you've gotten older, would you say your cups become more full?
In what way?
Of just experiences, negative, positive, just there is more on your plate that you need to take a break from?
I think it's – well, we talked about it. I think it's a different stress, right? And my personality is I want to be able to be there and keep it under control, or at least have a say in it, or things in the position I'm in now. I don't necessarily have that, right? So I've had to learn other ways. I trust everybody who works for me. I trust my command staff. I trust my supervisors, all of that. And in fact, it's reciprocal. They take really good care of me. It's a reciprocal thing whenever you set the tone and then let them go. You have to trust them. And there's times that people get out of line, right? And then you gotta fix that. It's the hardest part of leadership is whenever somebody does something wrong and you got to reprimand them for it. It's just like reprimanding your kids. It doesn't feel good to do that, but it's a different kind of stress, a different kind of way. The higher up you go, but I think I manage it. I think I manage it pretty well. I mean, to the point of I know when I'm like, okay, you need a break. You just need it. Maybe it's just a weekend. Maybe I just need to go to the farm for the weekend. Because what you guys see, I always tell people, what you see with these eyes don't ever go away. You can't unsee things. You can't unhear things. You can't unsmell things.
Yeah.
Some smells you never forget.
Right?
I always tell people, You know, you always get this. I know you guys get it too. What's the worst thing you ever seen?
Yeah.
And I won't answer that anymore. I don't answer it. I used to when I was younger. I didn't understand. But I always tell people, I wish my brain could forget what my eyes have seen. That's one of the best things I've ever heard. I believe it.
Yeah, people. I mean, and people don't. They're not trying to be rude, right? They think what you do is awesome.
Yeah, I don't fault them for it.
Yeah, but like this past year, I'll just example one of my officers that works for me. He's a great kid. He's the one that got shot. They gave him a 1% chance to live, and he did. And he comes to work every day. I just saw him this morning. I mean, he's not back on the street, but he comes to work every day, right? We didn't sign up. We didn't sign up going, hey, this is what's going to happen, and you're in charge of all of them. So that's a different kind of stress. But what I've learned through that is perseverance, watching this kid come back, all the things, and his attitude is, hey, I'm glad it happened to me because look what happened. I can share my story and be inspirational to other people and say you can survive. And there's so many times that people in our line of business don't find that person to latch onto or find that right outlet, and they go down a bad path, and then the next thing you know, a really great career is not where that career should be, or it takes a detour for a while until somebody, snatches onto them and says, hey, man, get back over here. And like I said early, I'm pretty lucky. My dad's a pretty hard-nosed guy. Like, he's tough. And my mom's been there for us. I mean, look, hell, they have a son that's on the blue team. They have a son who's on the red team. They have lost a granddaughter. Both their sons have been through a divorce. They treat my dad especially, he's got two granddaughters, like, he'll move heaven and earth for them. And I'm usually like, hey, you used to beat my ass. Yeah.
That's what grandparents do.
Yeah. But, but I always go back. They're salt of the earth people, right? They came from nothing. They had nothing. But they taught us hard work and how to fight through and persevere. And they're still there to this day. My dad will be up there at my place he's 71 years old. He'd be up there, and I'll be like, what are you doing? Well, it looked like that tree needed to be sawed down. I'm like, he's chainsawing trees down, or he's on the tractor, or he's doing whatever. So I think a lot of that comes from them. And early on, I mean, what you learn as a kid really sticks with you, whether you want to or not. That's why we talk about kids today that we see. I see kids at work, and I just want to take them and be like, help them. Because it really is what they learn from that young age through middle school and on that is going to be who they are a lot of their life, and you're going to reflect back on that. I do the same thing. I mean, we were not privileged kids, and I don't know what privilege means to other people, but we also didn't know we were poor. So,
well, and I think that's so true. Is how you were raised is kind of an indicator most of the time. I mean, you could look at my own family or whatever to see the opposite of that, but the values that are instilled by your parents into you is kind of an indicator of where you're going to be, as an adult. And the people that you meet and interact with along the way, reinforce those values or take you down a different path or whatever.
Absolutely. And like I said, they've hung in there the whole way. So it's not like I go, sit down with mom and dad and go, hey, here's my stuff, because they don't need to hear all the ins and outs of what we do at work. They like to every once in a while, but it's not good whenever.
That's how my grandpa is. He'll ask me, and then like halfway through, you can tell he's like, I regret this.
Yeah, because getting back to something, I move around. We talked about stress and talk about my parents. We talk about all these things, but I kind of have used this line over the last year. What most people in this world find heroic, we all find horrific. And I talked to that about to my officers, and I'm like, look, people are going to be this, and you're going to be like, I don't want to talk about it. But you got to find someone to talk about it, because what they're trying to lift you up on is what you're like, I don't want to have nothing to do with. And if that's a line that sticks with anybody at my station, you know, I want them to know, hey, the things that sometimes we do is no one else in this world could do. That's why you were there.
Yeah. I was watching a documentary about Medal of Honor recipients, and that was kind of the theme throughout. They're like, they give me this medal. It was the worst day of my life.
Right.
I don't want to, you know, I don't want this thing. The only reason that I'm accepting it is because of the sacrifices that, you know, the guys I was with made, or, you know, it's like, wow.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny you should say that. And after my divorce and my daughter was living with me, and, you know, there's days that we just didn't want to be in an apartment, right? So when I got transferred, one day I had to pack up all my stuff at work and move to another place, and we moved into this office. I moved all my stuff into this office, and she's like, "What is this stuff, Dad? What is all this?" I'm like, "Yeah, just stuff I've acquired over the years." But it was every award I've gotten on the police department, every outside. I mean, you know, you just accumulate things over the years because you're doing your job, but you get accolades for it. And my daughters, because I never once put anything up in my house, and I always kept it in boxes at work. And she's like, "Dad, you need to put this stuff up." I'm like, "Well, you put it up. I'm not putting it up." And she did. She decorated my whole office with all this stuff, and what I learned something from that. That means something to her. Whereas, like you just said, you look at it and it reminds you of, I remember that day. Yeah. You know, early on in my career, I had my first real near-death experience. January the 1st or December the 31st, whatever you want to call it. It was January the 1st because it was about 2:30 in the morning. And we got behind a car, me and my partner, and this guy was just rocketing, bouncing his truck, kind of hill jumping this and that, and he didn't even know we were there. Twist, turn, this, that. Next thing you know, we're in the back of a house, and all I knew was I-70 was close to me, and the fight was on, and we were fighting over my gun. And I know it doesn't look like it today, but when I came out of the police department, I only weighed 167 pounds, soaking wet. But that night changed my life in a different kind of way, and that was in 1997. I thought I was going to die. You know, it was a fight over my gun, and I didn't know exactly where I was at because the fight was on, and they're calling you, "Where are you?" And I'm like, "Get me some help." And luckily it turned out right. I didn't have to use lethal force or anything, but we were there. But what it did was change who I was, because I'd been a college athlete for all these years trying to lift weights, gain weight, and all that. You have a near-life death experience, and 3 months later I weighed 205 pounds. So in a matter of 3 months I put on 35 pounds. And it wasn't, I mean, I got in the weight room, and those kinds of things that happen to you in your life change you. And a lot of times you'll walk around, and I always say this, there's two me's. There's two Doug Niemeyers. There's work Doug Niemeier, and there's not. And they really are kind of two different guys, because when you go to work, you got to be on point. Because it truly is life or death. And you can't really have an off day at work, because not only is it life or death, but it might be you saving someone else's life, or you're going to be there when it's that person's worst day. So every time you go into someone's home or you go on a call, they just had the worst day of their life, and you're always the one that's there. So there's really not an off time. So that's why I talk about these awards, and they mean something to my daughter and this and that. Where is I going with that? So she sees all that, whereas I really do see it as those were some of the worst things that could have happened, but they turned out good. Yeah. And you do go accept those because somebody's like, "Hey, you did a great job," and this and that, but I always kept them in a box up until I figured out from her. She taught me a lesson that day of, Dad, this is important because we don't know that part of you. So now, if I change jobs, I call her and I go, time to pack up the office. It's your turn. And she comes and packs up the office, puts it in the box, and wherever I end up transferred to next, she sets it all up, and I never touch it.
You know, in those awards, it's not just to your daughter, but to the families. That, you know, no matter, it was your worst day, it was their worst day, but you did what you could. Mm-hmm. Whether it turned out a good outcome or a bad.
I think that even speaks, too, to why they call you on anniversaries.
Yeah.
Oh, there's no doubt, you know. There's no doubt. And I take their call every time. I mean, you have to. You know, they don't have anywhere else to turn. So you take that call every single time, and I'll take them until they stop calling. But, you know, there's a couple mothers that call me on the anniversary of their son's murder. Clockwork. I've been doing it for, one of them, I've been doing it for 19 years. 19 years. Talk to her every year. So, you know, that's a side of, I mean, I'm sure even some of my extended family would probably watch some of this and be like, I had no idea. But just like you guys, you don't just walk around sharing. But I do share my story of life because it's so complex, complicated, but to me it's normal.
Yeah.
You know, this chaos is normal.
Yeah.
But a lot of times people will be like, well, Doug just stands in the corner. Well, I might just be standing there, but I can guarantee you this is running as fast as 10 people in the room because it's already working overtime all the time. You know, so that's it's a complicated life, but I would have it no other way. And I just told someone this week, I go, if I was a younger man, and even if I'm not a younger man, if I had the opportunity to go back and work homicide again now that my kids are grown, start tomorrow.
What did you've referenced it a lot, but I don't think we've really dug into it. What did that do to you, negative or positive, being in homicide?
The positive side, I think it taught me how to be a leader. Taught me how to be a leader on this police department because you got to make a jillion decisions, and you got to make them like that. There's not really a lot of time to sit there and you got to make them, and they got to be right. You make a decision and it's wrong, it may cost you the case. It may cost you a lot of things, right? So it taught me how to be a leader. On the negative side, and I'm not the only one. There's a lot of people that have been in that unit same amount of time, some even longer. You know, have the same story I do. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unhear what you've heard. And you can't unsmell what you smell. Those are with you for the rest of your life. It just is. You know, whenever you said that earlier, I mean, it almost brings me to tears every single time because I know the worst day. I know the worst crime scene I ever saw. And I can see it right now. It'll never go away. So, you know, whenever people ask that, I kind of avoid that situation. Or sometimes I've done things like, do you really want to hear it? And then when I tell it,
scare them a little bit.
And then when I tell them, they're like, oh, sorry. No, don't be sorry. You wanted to know. I'm going to tell you. So that's the part that, but once again, I'll do it all over again because I feel like that's what I was born to do. Otherwise, I'd be riding around on some red truck.
Having the time of your life.
Right,
too.
yeah. So keeping the concrete people out of work.
Yep. Running 2 a.m. toe pains.
Or when the cops
And that's the other thing
It's
I
the
love
cops
to-
that call you, that's the problem.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Here
Hey,
we
man.
go.
Hey, he's
They don't
just
feel
drunk.
good. Right, they got a cut. I'm like, yeah, it's
Actually,
man.
actually,
I ran that call.
The amount of chest pains that come out of your division's jail.
I was
we
just
have
about
a
to
chat
tell you.
about that.
I was about to tell you, chest pains. A lot of chest pains. A lot of chest pains.
You're the
But,
only patrol division in the city that can stack up 3 ambulances at one time.
Yeah. We also run the only jail. So, yes. Well, we don't run the only one, but we have the busiest one, you know?
Definitely the busiest.
Yeah, the busiest zone. We answer the zone I work, we are in charge of, we answer over 1,500 911 calls a week. Just my zone. And, but one other thing I was going to say, and we just did it, I actually learned how to laugh when I was in homicide. And you're like, what?
That's a strange place to learn how to laugh.
Because if you're not laughing, you're
crying.
Yeah. So that's what I learned to do. I had to learn we had to learn, and it may not always have been the best, but you had to learn how to do like we're doing now. Sometimes you got to learn how to banter and get on to guys, but you got to be able to take it too, right?
Absolutely.
And you got to be able to go back and forth, because sometimes it might not be the best time, but that's you got to. I can remember my squad getting in trouble back in the day. You'd be on the news and like, you guys are on there laughing. I'm like, well, what do you want me to do? Take them over here and let them all sit there on camera and cry?
Yeah.
So you got to.
Here we have the police department
humor.
pouting.
Well, yeah,
Yes.
I mean, there has to be, and we've kind of talked about this before, there has to be that decompression coping skill, something, and that seems to be very general throughout the police departments, fire service, military.
It just doesn't work at family dinners. That's the problem.
That kind of,
Well, the public immediately don't understand why you're at a crime scene or a bad car wreck and you're smiling or telling a joke or.
Yeah. Well, it's because
It's a good way to distress.
Yeah.
To de-stress, and which actually leads me into something else. We've talked about it a lot here. Is compassion fatigue. I've seen it in myself. I've seen it in other guys in the fire department, and not to throw stones, but I've seen it in officers that we've run with, because we run a lot of calls together. You're the police department, the fire department, and you can see it. So I mean, how do you coach your young officers when you start seeing something like that, or you hear it? That way they don't, because I mean, we all know attitude changes a lot on how a call goes. Whether it's their attitude or our attitude, it could totally change the way that call is handled and what happens. So how do you guys combat that?
Well, I just think for me, and looking back, that's changed over the years too, right? Mm-hmm. There's more opportunity, and it's like I said, back whenever the first time I ever asked for EAP, I didn't tell nobody. I didn't tell my spouse at the time. I didn't tell nobody I was going.
So what was I don't want to interrupt you, but what was the mindset there of not telling anybody? Was it
back then? You
just didn't do it.
You didn't do it. There was there's that thing on the back of your insurance card you can call and you're like, I'm not telling nobody I called. And I didn't even tell my spouse at the time I called. I just went and did it under the radar. And there's so many things available now, which I think is fabulous. It should have been done years ago for all first responders, and I mean for everybody. You have things like the Warriors Ascent. You have a lot of the military things now have come to first responders that can, and I can't think of the other one that we have right off the top of my head for some reason. And then there's this year. Our boss put in place is going to put on an on-staff psychologist that you can just go to.
Huge.
That's there for you, and
they got to understand the police department way of life and what you guys do, and because we talked about that too.
Yeah,
with the
cultural competency.
Competency,
and it's important. It's important that people know all those things, and there's so many things readily available now that wasn't 25 years ago.
Not even 5 years ago.
Yeah.
It's so much better than what it was. We're still way behind, but we're getting there.
But I will say this. I feel like, once again, we talked about this early on in this conversation. There's more. We have peer support on our department. Every time there's a critical incident, and back then you would just pull guys off to the side and go behind the convenience store and be like, "Everybody all right? You all right? All right? Yeah. All right? Yep. Okay. Everybody's all right." And then away you went. Wasn't nobody all right? And it wasn't until right when I got out of homicide as a detective and I went back to the field, I'll never forget a call where a child got ran over, and it was bad. And the look on those younger officers' face was, I even told them, I go, Everybody close your eyes and just hold the blankets up. I got it. I didn't. Well, you know what happened, right?
Hey, everybody looking.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, and then I was like, I told y'all to keep your eyes closed. So we went and did that. I did that because we did it with each other when I was a detective, and they were like, we did do that, but we did it in a different way. We went back there and you let people cry, you let people get their emotions out and talk, and then you self-evaluate each other and go, you good, or do you need to see somebody? And I can remember that being one of the early on times I did that, and I've still had a couple of them come up and go, I remember when you did that, and they were doing that when they became supervisors. And I think that's what we talk about. Why don't you just retire, Doug? Well, I think there's still that opportunity to do things now more so in a management position. You're managing people instead of maybe managing the public. We still manage the public a lot. I'm when I leave here, I got to go talk to some civic leaders back in my zone. But you're more so managing folks in your zone or your division or whatever it may be. And I think this is what I've always wanted to do, is be able to take all my life experience, good, bad, or indifferent, and say, here I am. If you need something, you let me know, because I don't really hand out advice. I don't, he was my father-in-law all the way up until he passed away, but, he always said, you looking for affirmation or confirmation? What are you doing? And I'm like, I'm not really for sure. I just asked you the question. I'm kind of looking for opinion. And he's like, here's the reason I don't give you my opinion is because if you don't hear what you've already made up your mind, you're just going to go to him and say, what do you think of this? And you're going, okay, that's what I thought. So you have to go into things with open minds, and when it comes to dealing with things like what we did behind the convenience store, you don't ever want to put that on somebody. What are they looking for? What are you trying to push into them? I don't know if this is making sense. It's making sense to me, but it's just one of those.
Yeah, you're not going to tell them how to deal with something.
Yeah,
but just kind of let them know that there's options.
Options.
If you need help, my door's open, or we can get you this number or this number, and if you don't want to tell anybody, you don't have to tell anybody. But there's help there for you.
I think for me personally, I don't know how you guys, me personally, my front porch is the best place for me to be, because I find comfort in that, and then I find people that sit down that I can talk to. I just pulled up in outside here. My phone rang. Is one of the supervisors. He's a supervisor. He's 2 levels below me, and called. Hey, I'm just checking on you. You okay? I go, yeah. Why? Did something wrong? He goes, nope. Just haven't checked on you in about a month. He goes, you're always on the go, boss. You're always at everything. You're da-da-da-da. And he goes, I just want to check on you. I'm like, I said, well, that's funny you should be checking on me, because I'm about to walk in and talk about my mental health state and how it is with, how my 25 years in this job. And I said, but what are the odds? What are the odds of, he just called me out of the blue.
Well, it's good that that's starting to happen more.
Yeah.
And I've heard more of it even on our side. It's been happening more, because we didn't have a peer support until we lost 2 guys on line of duty, and the guys FDNY came in. They started theirs after 9/11, and they helped kickstart ours.
Right.
And it's helped. I know I feel it's probably saved some lives.
Good.
On our side. And if you guys are doing the same thing, I'm sure it saved some lives there. Just be able to get it out. Have a shoulder to cry on. Have somebody who actually understands.
Well, and to make it okay to talk about it,
Yeah.
And I think that's great, being in the leadership position that you're in, of, people are doing that for you.
Yeah.
So it's trickling down through.
I think the biggest thing that I would want to say is, it doesn't matter if you are the number 1 person in the organization, or you're the first day on the job person in the organization, of whatever that is and whatever line of work. You're a hospital worker, you're with the red team, the blue team. If you see somebody and they want to talk, everything else is secondary. Everything else stops. And you need to, I don't care if it's a brand new guy that comes into my office, or I might win the life-saving award right now. And
I'm going to let Joe. I'll be honest with you.
I might win the life-saving award right now. It doesn't matter if it's everything should stop. And be like, somebody comes to you and says, you got a minute to talk? That means you need about an hour.
Minimum.
And you need to say, come in here and shut the door.
Absolutely.
Doug, I got a question. I got two questions for you. I got one as a father and one as a supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm intrigued on how, as a father, as an officer working in homicide, seeing the worst of the worst of the worst in people, how do you raise daughters, especially in this world, knowing what's out there, but also, raising them to see the positive side in things?
Yeah, that's a good question because both of my kids grew up in the back of a police car. I literally had car seats in the back of my car because I was on call all 24/7. So you guys hear the police radio, they'll be like, "Oh, that's such and such." That's my kids. They knew voices on the radio of who it was. So they grew up in this environment. I know, how do I raise them? I don't think, like I said, I'm not the world's greatest dad. I made a lot of mistakes, but the one thing is I just kind of stay grounded, right? I just try to stay here with them, and I try not to make my life. I try to stay here with them, and not up and down, up and down. It's got to stay calm, because I am the storm. That's what's going on back here. The one positive that I do find of it is they see a lot of people from the blue team, and they're like, they literally consider them. I know they have their Uncle Darren, but they got a lot of uncles, right? And that's how they call them. And they have those guys' phone number. They know they can call any of those people at any time and say, hey. And that's the bigger thing is I feel like they see the umbrella of how big their family is when it's really just their dad and their uncle, right? But they got a lot bigger family than that cares about them, goes to their softball games, have tracked my oldest daughter all the way through college, and they still talk. I know she still talks to a few of them to this day. So raising them is way more important than this job. And I always tell people I'm not like I'm giving parenting classes. For heaven forbid, I wouldn't ever think of trying to do that.
You'd have to pay people to take it.
Yeah, yeah. But I always tell young people who work for me now, because I'm getting to the end of my career, you guys. When this is all said and done, if you didn't take care of that, what's going to be there when this job isn't here for you anymore? If you didn't take care of your business with your family and you don't have that to go to whenever your job's over, what do you have? Because I'll be honest with you, I watch the guys that are retiring and the guys that have retired before me, and you hear about them for about 6, 7, 8 months.
And then they're gone. Yep. And the job just keeps going.
This train keeps rolling down the track, with or without you. And don't get me wrong, I give it 100% every day. I get up every morning and I want to go to work. And I'll stay for a long time and I'm going to keep working. But when that day comes, if you haven't built a relationship with your spouse or your kids, and now the one thing that was always a steady is gone, you'll have nothing. So I will tell you, I don't know for anybody that's listening or anybody that watches this, I was taught this, and this is one thing that I think really set the tone with my kids. Every kid wants a damn cell phone. I was opposed to it. My kids were probably the last kids that ever got cell phones. But I put a rule on that when they got it. In the morning, you will call me when you get to school, or you will call me when you're at the bus stop. Every day. And you will call me if I'm not home when you get home. period. That still happens. Right? I've already been on the phone with my youngest today. Now, my oldest daughter's got a job. She's working. She doesn't have to call her dad. She doesn't have to call her dad. But my one that's in college, every day. Every single day like clockwork. And I answer it. I don't give a damn what I'm doing. I'm like, can you hold on a second? This is my kid. 30 seconds. That's it. So you give your kid a cell phone, rule number 1, you will call dad every morning. And what's it become? Routine. That's what I do every day. I call my dad every morning. And that is, that started when they were in grade school, and one's grown and one's in college and still calling me. But the other one that was in college, the older one, she was calling me when she was in college too, because she'd be going to practice at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. Well, who the hell else is up at that time?
Yeah.
Her dad. Sometimes she's like, well, I'm walking across, So, but you can't, if you miss that moment, you'll never get it back. Time doesn't stop. And I always tell parents, I used to argue actually a lot with my ex at the time, or now, but I always want to drive my kids to practice. Why do you want to drive your kids to practice? They can't get away from you, for starters. They're stuck in the car, right? But you get an opportunity to have great conversation, because kids will look out the windshield and talk to you all day. Sit them down in a room, and then they're done. So when my girls were playing softball, I always took them to practice, because I always had them in the car at least to and from practice. And I got to spend tons of time finding out what they were doing, who they're hanging out, all these things. So it was great time spent. I love their sport, and they're both really good at it. But the time I got to spend in the car was the best parent time I ever had. So if your kids, it doesn't matter if they're playing sports, it doesn't matter if they're playing, in the band, if they're in drama, or whatever activity they're in, snatch them up and say, hey, I'll take you. It's time they can't get away from you, and it's things you'll learn about them that you're like, oh, really? Okay. So that's really where the foundation of my relationship with my kids came. It wasn't about coaching their team or this and that. It was about time spent in the car going to and from practice. And I've talked so long I forgot the second half of your question.
No, so it's I haven't asked it yet.
Oh, see, that's called old age too.
So with your kids being your kids and at home, Doug, let's talk about at work, Doug. With your young officers that look up to you, that, like you said, you're not in charge of, but you're responsible for.
Mm-hmm.
When you had an officer that was shot in the head with a 1% chance to live, you're responsible for him.
Devastating.
What is walk us through that as a supervisor, but also as someone that gives a good goddamn.
Yeah. So I'll never forget it. I was with my brother. We were actually working on the front gate. We were working on our front gate. I have a gate at my property. The phone just blew up. It was like boom, 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 boom. And I'm like, oh my God. So my house is over a quarter of a mile, which doesn't seem that far unless you're in a pair of rubber boots and you got to run. I'm like, oh my God. I couldn't run fast enough that day to get to my car, to get dressed, to make it down to the hospital. And the whole time you're like, okay, hang in there. You can't be this, I'll never forget getting to the hospital, and the big boss is there, and I know him, and you could see the look on his face, and he's a good guy, and he's like, we're gonna be all right, and I'm like, no, I don't, I'm a mess, kind of like I am talking about it, because I'm reliving it, which I don't mind reliving, because we just had another one, and I hope that commander kind of threw it a little bit, I guess, but what you have to turn around is, it's the same thing that homicide helped me do, is set your emotions right here for a second. All eyes are on you. What are you going to do? because you got 171 kids that work for you, and they're watching what you're doing, what you're saying, and how you're acting. You got to be a leader right now. You know, there's only so many times in life that you're going to have big instances where you got to step up and lead. And when I was there, I had to go, this young man, we have his family here, the doctors have him. I turned my attention immediately to the people who work for me and like, all right, y'all go sit in there, y'all get in here. You know, we take over, you guys have seen it, we take over the hospital, right? It's a mess. So you got to direct traffic, and then you got to start working on emotions, feelings, letting people vent, getting the proper mental health there for your employees and all those things. And then I will tell you, after I got all that stuff done that day, man, I went out of the parking lot and just got my car and it broke down. I'm like, all right, get all that out and get yourself back together because you got to go back in there and do this again. And we did. And that's how I dealt with my emotions that day, dealing with all those kids. And you can't say things like it's going to be all right because you don't know if it's going to be all right.
And they don't want to hear it.
Yeah. You don't know if it's going to be all right. But what you got to say is, hey, we did our job. We did it right. These things happen. You know, we talk about experiences, but the main thing that I do at my age now is stay calm. Stay calm. Because if the bosses are, you know, like I always tell them, if you see me excited, if you see me out of control, then you all should have been there a long time ago. Because at my level, if they're that way, shit has hit the fan.
If you see me run.
Yeah, right?
Run fast.
If you're waiting for that, if you see me out of control, it's really bad. So that down there, that day I was like, take a deep breath. You got to stay calm and you got to keep because as soon as as you're the leader, as the manager of a team, as a sports team, I look back on my life and I learned a lot of things from sports. When our coach was out of control, the team's out of control. Mm-hmm. When the supervisor, the boss is out of control, everybody's out of control. When the boss is calm, has direction, sets the tone, everybody just kind of takes that tone. And I tell you, all those years in homicide and all that stuff and having to manage scenes and manage families and manage your employees and all those things brings you to that thing where sometimes people are wondering if do you care? You ever heard that? Do you even care? I'm like, I care more than anybody in this world. The thing is I got to keep it right here because if I start showing my emotions, everybody else's emotions are going to get out of control. And then we've seen it, people just lash out sometimes and be upset. We see people, like you said, cry, but people get angry. When I was younger, I used to get pretty angry. Mm-hmm. But then kids change you. They make you have these things called feelings. Yeah, they make you have feelings, and then when you have that, and then you show that, and that day, my number one job was to keep everyone here. And, things turned out okay. I don't ever want to relive it. We just discussed it. That young man told his story yesterday. I've heard it about 10 times, and every time he tells it, I literally have to sit there and try not to cry. Like, how you have a 1% chance to live, and he can't wait to get back out on the street. And I'm like, I would beg to have 100 of him, right? That's how much he wants to do this job in a time where it's hard to do this job. And like I said, I could retire tomorrow. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen because I feel like we got a lot left to give. And let's remember this. Anybody needs to remember this. It's in this line of work or your guys' line of work. More people out there love you than do not. There's more people out there that want you than don't. You just sometimes always get the bad. You always get the rah, 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 rah. You only hear that.
Yeah, squeaky wheel gets the grease.
You don't hear the people all the time.
Yeah.
I got to tell, this is how fast things change. That day changed like that. The day Shayla died changed like that. This past year, on Thursday, I remember we had an entire station full of food because we're working because there's COVID, and thank you guys for staying open. And on Sunday, they were protesting my station. In 4 days, we went from having meals and things being brought in because we're working at COVID, and by Sunday, they're out there protesting. You're like, what happened?
Y'all got any more food?
Yeah. And it changed that fast. It changed that fast in the past year. And, if people could just see the inside of what we all do every day. Everybody came on this job because they wanted to help people. It's the number one line. You always, what'd you come on the job? I want to help people. 25 years later, what do you really want to do? I want to help people, but now I want to help my folks that work for me. And I want to help the public too, and I do. But it's I think the real reason we all still come on this job and have to remind ourselves sometimes is you came here because you want to help people and you want to be a public service person, even though you've ran the same guy 127 times because he can't get out of bed. You're like, it's number 128. Yes. But the call right after that is the one that's going to be someone's worst day of their life, and you're going to be the hero on their worst day of their life, and you're going to make it right. And that's what we all signed up to do. So, yeah, I don't know that. Like I said, I get to talking. I can talk. I sit in interrogation rooms for so many years. Podcast an hour long is probably not long enough for me because my training detective always said you can't ask a single question about the crime until you've talked to him for an hour. Like, what? So, like...
Oh, you're 100% right. I'm ready to spill you my life story.
So
you're right. I did it off
yeah.
the bodies there.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to know. You're so cool.
So we would spend an hour doing this right here in an interrogation room. Spend an hour just talking before you ever got to talking about whatever crime you're in there to talk about. So I get a little long-winded at times, just because that's how what do you fall back on? What do you guys what you're trained to do?
Yeah.
And sometimes that also gets people on the blue team in trouble because we just talk. We should probably shut up. So
I was waiting for the nap joke because I'm kind of tired.
Yeah, well, I've been on such good behavior with you guys. You have no idea. And it's. But I will say,
we do the same thing.
But I will say this, I respect the hell out of what you guys do, and I feel like I'm one of the few people probably on the blue team because first of all, I don't care, but I walk into any station, and usually I know somebody or recognize somebody like, "What's up, man?" So it's nothing for me if I'm hungry to stop at. I know you guys got food all the time. I stop at just about any fire station in the city, and usually I know somebody either having run a call with them from years ago or just because of the relationship with me and my brother, but it's always me against the red team. I don't need any help. One against the world.
That's what's cool about this job, though, is like we will sit and just rib each other all day.
Right.
And somebody from the public's like, you suck. We're like, hey, listen. We tell them they suck. You don't.
Yeah, I say that all the time. I call it big brother, little brother syndrome. I can do that with my little brother, but nobody else can, right? And that's that big brother, little brother syndrome. And
we're the big brother. Just clarified. Yeah, got it.
Yeah. So, yeah. No, it's I do appreciate that though. It's there's a lot of guys on the red team I enjoy hanging out with and been around my whole life, right? And I think it's great to be able to, because when you show up, you got to trust. I tell people all the time, when it's a real bad day whenever you see the red team coming to help you. That means we've had a really bad day. It's usually the blue team coming to help the red team. But if the red team's coming to help you, you've had a really bad day. And don't forget, that's the day you really need them. So I always tell my folks that too. There's not really that rift besides me and my brother. And, there's a lot of things. I'm like, why do you guys save? I pay a lot of insurance. I've paid a lot of insurance over the years, right? He's like, yeah, but you might have some property. Like, no, get some new stuff.
Just let it go.
Let it go,
See,
man.
it's the pictures and the heirlooms that we go in after.
Oh, I've heard. Yeah, I've heard all about it.
You got to save that stuff.
Yeah, I'm thinking of.
And it's a lot of fun. I'll be honest. Have you ever done anything like that with Darren?
What?
Fire stuff?
I was actually on the fire department.
Not with us.
Nah.
You said no.
Yes, I said no. But yeah, I was on the same. I was the same route he was.
Oh, okay.
Early on.
I got you.
So yeah, I've worn bunker pants, and yes, I've sprayed water, and it's kind of tough though. As I've gotten older, I'm afraid of heights, so I kind of have to be the driver, so I can just run the pump. That'll be the last job I'm doing, right? I'm not going up in any ladders. I'm not climbing ladders. If a guy my size falls off, I mean, stuff's going to break.
We bounce, just so you know.
I'm going to tell you, this guy'd be crumbled. Yeah, but no, in perfect example, one day a phone call could have changed my whole life if I would have decided to go to the red team. Mm-hmm. Could have changed everything, right? But I mean, whole different route in life. But there's an example of a day of making a decision and changed everything. But yeah, I don't know. It's a thing. What you guys do is hard, and it's easy to make fun of, but it's hard. I mean, you work like 2 days a month or 4. But eight. Oh,
Yeah, 8 days a month.
I've worked 8 days in the last 2 weeks.
Worked 8 days in the last 9 days.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
When I was on call in homicide and you were on call for 28 days, you pretty much worked for 28 days. You're like, God, I can't wait till I get off call. Yeah. So, but what I was going to is the same thing. You know, whether you're in your guys' line of work or my line of work, or you're working in a hospital, or anything that you're dealing with the public and trauma and all those things, it's we just got to remember to look around, and I enjoyed it here to laugh and look at the lighter side of life, and remember, you are a hero in someone's eyes. You are the person that saved the day. You are the person who people want to become. There are still people that want to be a fireman. There are still people that want to be a policeman. There are still people that want to be a nurse and a doctor and all those things. No matter what the world out here is saying, we still have people coming into this line of work because it's honorable. It is. And, I mean, I talked to you guys earlier, but a lot of years ago, we had a tragic event that changed the world. And that all of a sudden everybody wanted to do our job, right? Mm-hmm. And when those things happen, everybody wants to do it. Everybody's at it for Halloween. But when they get there, they go, oh, I didn't know it was like this. And that's what we're talking about today is if somebody reaches out to you, talk to them. Take the time to talk to them.
Absolutely. I don't think I could have said it any better.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming, Doug. I mean, great stuff.
Thanks.
We appreciate it.
If anybody has any questions or whatever, I'm not hard to find. I'm not hard to get a hold of. And if anybody out there needs to just sit down on my porch and talk, get a hold of me, get a hold of my brother. We'll listen.
All right.
So our doors are always open, too, at every station.
Yeah.
Blue or red, doesn't matter. Hot cup of coffee is always ready, and we got food.
Yes, you do.
Might not be healthy food, but we got food.
That's right. All right. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for stopping by. Take care of yourself.